All right, it's 3 minutes past the hour. Let's get started. So just a few housekeeping type items. If you have a question, just put a question mark in front of it so that when I start looking at the questions, I don't think there is anybody right now monitoring this, but I will take a look at your questions as we go on. And I think that will be a good way to get this thing started. Okay. Can everybody see the slides? Just put that in the chat. If you can see the slides, please put that in the chat. Super. All right. So what is cybersecurity? In this time that we are going to spend together, I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of what is cybersecurity and why you should care about it, right? Before I begin, I'm going to have what is known as a disclaimer. So the views expressed in this presentation and during the session are my personal opinions and do not reflect the official policy or position of my employers. This is a volunteer-led effort to contribute to the profession and pay forward the many kindnesses and instances of support and guidance that I've received throughout my career. Let me start a little bit about myself. So who am I and why am I even here and why you should care about listening to what I have to say? I work at Verizon I'm a risk manager and I'm a part-time lecturer. I teach a 401 level class at Rutgers University. I have a MBA in security assurance and I am a doctoral student. I'm doing research in cybersecurity. I have a bunch of certifications. I have 2 patents that were granted to me, and I volunteer. I'm a co-founder of Step Up Skill, which is a 501c3, and I am the organizer of the CISSP and CCSP exam study groups. Let's get started. So what exactly is cybersecurity? When we talk about cybersecurity, we are talking about protecting information. We are talking about protecting systems from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, and disruption to our infrastructure. So suppose we were an e-commerce store. What would cybersecurity help us do? Make sure that only the people who are authorized to access an account can access that account. Only people who are authorized to buy can buy that stuff. And only the people who we want to access, means we want to access our website, are able to access our website. So what is the importance of cybersecurity? Data protection, then protecting our devices and networks. Privacy means we do not want data of our customers to be out there on the dark web. And then reputation. Reputation is important because nobody wants to do business with you if you have a known tendency of breaches and you've got like problems with your security, and people are afraid that if they even create an account with you, everybody would know. Like suppose you go to a hospital for some kind of a treatment, or maybe you don't want all your stuff out there, right? This brings us to a very, very basic, important concept about cybersecurity. When we talk about securing something, what do we mean by that? We're talking about 3 important basic tenets of security, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what exactly does that mean? CIA, are you talking about the government? No, we're not talking about that. We are talking about basic concepts. So what does confidentiality mean? It means that we are keeping whatever data is shared with us secret and preventing unauthorized access. Means if you create an account on my platform, then you have access to that, and it is not shared with anybody, or it's not out there, or it's not like nobody else has access to it without your permission. So yes, I can say, hey guys, do you want to share this information to get targeted ads? Would you like? So this is confidentiality, means your information is kept private, and only those who you provide access to can read it. That brings us to the another topic, which is integrity. Now, when we talk about integrity, what does that mean? That there is no unauthorized change or unauthorized deletion of the data. Think about this. Like, suppose you are Netflix. What does integrity mean to you? Well, it means that if I have a catalog of titles, means I've got this huge library of movies, nobody can go in there and delete that, right? So unauthorized deletion or make changes to it. So what are we trying to enforce is data accuracy, making sure that the data is not tempered. We are trying to make sure that that data has integrity. It means it is not subject to any unauthorized changes. Suppose you create a Google Doc. What can you do with that when you create a Google Doc? Well, you can, if you create it, it means you can save it, you can delete it, you can share it with people. But when we talk about integrity of that Google Doc, you are the owner and you can give permissions to all those things, but nobody else who is not given explicit permission by you can go in there and delete stuff. That brings us to the last thing, which is availability. So what exactly does availability mean? And if probably yesterday you were aware of what happened, people lost access to a lot of systems. There was disruption. Now, it's not like I'm not talking about it from a cybersecurity perspective. I'm just talking about that example. The yesterday where the flights were canceled, people did not get, there was huge disruption. I'm talking about that from an availability perspective. It means that suppose you have an e-commerce website, then in that case, your customers should be able to access that website when they want it, right? Subject to whatever rules you have. It also means that suppose you have a banking app or you are a bank, in that case, your customers can probably, access their accounts whenever they want. Whatever, so as a business, you have what is known as a service level agreement. It means that you have an understanding with your customer saying, hey, you will be able to do this XYZ during this time. Obviously, for maintenance, there will be like sometimes when there will be system downtime, etc. But availability basically means that authorized users who have been authenticated get access to the services that were promised. Now, what is authorization? What is authentication? We'll cover that in the upcoming slides. And we are just making sure when we talk about availability that data systems, infrastructure is available to authorized users. We're not talking about everybody, right? We are just talking about people who should have access. Maybe they are our paying customers, maybe they are our free customers, but people who we have agreed to give permission and access to. That brings us to a few more concepts. This is again a very basic concept, and yes, we do not live in places that look like this, and we do not live in something which is covered by a moat or these high walls, etc. Post-COVID, most people have experienced working from home, studying from home, doing a lot of things that they could never imagine from home or remote locations. So, but the concepts remain the same. It's called defense in depth. So what exactly does it mean? That there are multiple layers of security that are implemented. Think about it, right? When you come into your own house, you come in and you have a key, lock, etc. at the outside door. Even when you are coming in, sometimes suppose you have a if you are in a gated community, you require access to that. Once you drive in on your driveway, you get out, you get into your garage, or you get into your house. You need to have, so those are various different layers, right? So gated community, so you need a dongle, or maybe there is some other physical security control that you need to bypass. Then when we talk about layers, we are talking about how are you going to provide access to various assets. Again, let's talk about your house. You come in and you will have a special place for valuables, jewelry. You have a special place in your house for your shoes. You have a different place for your house for your computer, for your smartwatch, etc., etc. What are you doing? You are placing those things in different places based on value, usage, or convenience. Same way, when we talk about layered security, we are talking about different security controls that we can plug in as we need in a business. And then what do all these things do together? They increase protection. And the next slide, we will talk about a little bit more details. If you have any questions so far, just put them in the chat and I will get to them in a few minutes. Again, so when we are talking about layers of defense, why do we need these layers of defense? Why can't we just have one big physical security thing and just dump everything everywhere? Now, what we do as a business is when we talk about data, right? I'm talking about customer data. Not everything it has to be protected the same way. And by putting in multiple layers of controls, what are we doing? We are making sure that there is not one single point of failure, which is going to just give access to everything. So just like we have things that we might put in a bedroom, we might lock that. There are certain valuables that we might put somewhere else in a vault. Maybe we have a gun safe, whatever it is that you're trying to protect. We are trying to make sure that there is not one single point of failure, in the sense that if one single control fails for whatever reason, we do not let ourselves be open to data theft, data exfiltration, or in case of our house, somebody be able to walk out with all our valuables, right? That brings us to, again, when we talk about this layers of defense, how are we talking? I mean, what do you mean by that in case of a work situation, a business, right? So we have data which is provided to us by our customers. So when you open an account, you provide me with a bunch of details, and now that is called customer data. That has to be protected by law, because there are certain laws that say, oh, you are going to take care of customer data in certain ways, and depends on what kind of a business you are. If I was a bank, there is a regulation. If I was a hospital, there is different regulation. If I was something else, then depends on what you are doing, right? You have that data. It has to be safeguarded in a certain way. Now you have code. So how are you going to protect your code? How are you going to protect your assets? Assets in the sense could be physical assets, could be systems, whatever. So what we do is we do data classification, means we will provide different data, different kind of, and then different labels. We'll call it confidential, we might call it highly confidential, we might call it public, private, and then the government has a different way of classification. And the reason for all that is that we cannot, just like at home, you can't just like buy a huge safe and put everything in there, right? So you have different areas or different like storage facilities or different places where you will keep different things based on their usage, based on your convenience, and based on the value of that valuable. Same way as a business, I need to understand where I'm going to store my data, how I'm going to make sure that it is protected. So that is what the whole idea of defense in depth and layers of defense means. I see that there's a question. I'll get to it once I am done with my presentation, if that's okay. And I think it says recording will be okay. All right. So now physical security. We are talking about defense in depth, right? So locks, keys, security cameras, access control systems, and physical barriers. So this is when you talk about a business, we're talking about our gun gates and guards. Means even before you can come in, I want to know, and that again depends on the kind of business you're running, right? If you are going to the FBI office in Newark, then it's different from a bank and from a hospital. So different places have got different physical security requirements and they implement it differently. Again, why do we need all that? Because we want to make sure who we let in. And this is akin to a lot of other controls. That brings us to network security. Just like we had physical controls for people, now when we talk about network security, we are talking about traffic that comes to us. Could be our website, could be our app, could be our our systems in whatever way we are talking, could be like our vendor when they are talking through APIs, etc. But network security means we are talking about digital traffic. So how do we protect that? There are various ways of protecting it and implementing what we know as security. When we talk about network security, we are going to have firewalls. What do firewalls do? At the basic level, they are filtering traffic. Do I need this traffic to come in? Is this legitimate traffic which has a business reason to get into my infrastructure? Now, here's the thing. I could decide that I do not do business outside the US, and I could use a service like Cloudflare, and I could tell them, like, I do not want traffic from outside the US, right? Granular. I can say, like, yeah, I do not want traffic from North America because nobody in North America has any use. I do not serve that market. So depending on what you're trying to do, you can implement firewalls. There are different types of firewalls, and we're not going to get into that because of paucity of time, but we can probably do in depth some other day. Then intrusion detection systems. Okay, great. You had firewall, but what if somebody got in? So just like you have a door and you've got a latch and you've got like ring camera outside and everything, but what happens if somebody gets in through the window, right? So you need to make sure you've got your alarm system on. If you are there, you're not there, depends on what kind of a physical security you want. But when we talk about protecting our digital systems, in that case, we have what is known as intrusion detection systems. Intrusion detection systems could be intrusion prevention systems. These are like words that are used differently, but what they do is that they are monitoring, and if there is any untoward traffic that we are observing, or there is any kind of untoward usage of resources, then in that case, if we get the people in the SOC analyst, SOC is like your security operations centers, they will get a triggered alarm which says, hey, look at this activity. Is this something that you meant to let in, or what's going on? So that is your intrusion detection systems. Then VPN. For most of you or your parents, you already know what VPN is. VPN is a virtual private network. So just like we showed that whole diagram about the moat and the castle, which is like protected by these walls. After COVID, what happened was everybody's working from home. So how do we make sure that the traffic that is coming in should be provided access with it? We do it with a VPN client. So we could have, like, suppose, again, I'm a business. What am I going to do if I've provided you with a hardware means I've provided you with a laptop. I'm going to have a VPN client on that. And what does that VPN client do? A bunch of things. First thing is that yes, it does provide you with access to those systems within your intranet. But one of the things it does is it is going to encrypt the traffic end to end. Another thing it's going to do is it will do what is known as checks on your system even before you get on. What are those checks? They are called like integrity checks, making sure, oh, do you have disk encryption on? It could be like a bunch of things, right? It could be a bunch of things, basic things. Oh, is this the latest version or are you using some older version? In that case, it will say, okay, you need to update your system before we can provide you with access. So there are a bunch of integrity checks that software client will do for you, and they will provide you with access. Then you like put in your username, password, depending on what you're doing. You will do all that, and then you will get access. And then network segmentation. So, all right, in the this thing, does everybody know what ransomware attacks are, or has anybody heard about ransomware attacks? Put that in the chat. Put that in the chat. Does anybody know ransomware attacks, or have you read about those attacks? All right, so I will explain to you. Basically, what ransomware attack does is that in case of a ransomware attack, you will be you will get some kind of a phishing email, and then it will be a link. And what that link does, it downloads malware on your, and I'm not going to go in a lot of detail about encryption, etc. I'm just giving you a 40,000 view of what damage ransomware costs and why network segmentation, because that will help you like put context. So what a ransomware attack does is that you download this particular malware. What the malware is doing is, over a period of a week or 2 weeks, it starts encrypting all your file. It starts like making sure that it proliferates. And now one fine day, based on whatever it is said to do, it's going to encrypt all your files. There is going to be a connection on the outside, etc., etc. But just to be very, very brief, it's going to encrypt all the files on your computer, and you will get a screen which says in 72 hours please pay blah blah blah, $500, $300, depends on like what you're doing, or a couple of $1 million in case of big businesses, hospitals, etc. And we will provide you with a key which will decrypt all your data and you will get access to it. And in that case, if suppose your network is not segmented. Now, let me talk to you about what network segmentation means. Is that suppose you have a laptop, and that's great, right? Your laptop is going to be encrypted. Now you cannot like access files on it, etc., etc. Think about it as a business. Everything is like connected. You are not like just standalone, like your dad's laptop is not connected to you. Great. But in case of a business, we're talking about everything which is connected, systems are connected, etc. So now that if you do not have different segments, means you do not separate, maybe you could do it by department, you could do it by sensitivity of the data, you could do it by probably you could do it by location, etc. So now if those are not segmented, it means all human resources employees will be on a separate network, all IT people will be on a separate network, and if they need to connect to each other, it will be through a firewall or whatever like network diagram that you come up with. Network segmentation basically means that you break it down so that something that impacts one part of your business doesn't, like malware doesn't go from one part to every other part and then cause havoc, and now you are totally shut down. this brings us to another concept, application security. When we talk about application, does everybody know what an application is? All right. So I'll just, we just move forward. So application security basically means that you have systems that you are offering to the public. Amazon.com could be a website, but there are different applications that go with it, right? So you could have bunch of applications. You have a shopping cart application, you could have like whatever, but or you could have a app on a phone and now you're using it. So everybody has used applications. Gmail, you've got Google Docs, these are applications, right? And how do you protect those applications? So these are software. So to secure your software and to prevent application, this is where your application security comes in. So when you start coding, you start with security in mind. So what do? You are doing secure coding. You are going to make sure that you do not code in a vulnerable way, like you do not provide. And whatever IDE means, whatever system like Visual Basic, you are going to have certain plugins put in there. You're going to make sure that you are as a business, you do not use vulnerable code, which will cause problems. Simple thing, when you are creating an application, you start like with collecting information from, so you have a form, put in your username, password, whatever else that you want to collect. What you have to do basic is input validation. Now, what does input validation mean? It means that if it says username and you are accepting email addresses, then you should make sure that if a person puts in like say 5 lines of code, drop table, blah, 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 or some kind of a SQL code or something, it is going to at that point check and say, oh, this is not proper input. It doesn't take it down the line and let it cause problems, right? So making sure, just like you do not like, you want to see who's coming at the door before you let them in, that is your input validation. So it starts with your secure coding. Then what you do is security testing. And you saw a huge example yesterday, which was there was an update sent out which proliferated through all the systems. Unfortunately, the testing was probably not done very thoroughly. It is usually like, it's not, updates are not new. It's been around for a very long time, but unfortunately things happen and that caused a lot of problems. So testing. So before anything, any code is migrated to your environment, means you start like, suppose you have version whatever 15.3.2. Now if you are adding some feature to it and you want to push that out, it goes through various gates which are going to do different kinds of testing on that code before it can be put in the hand of your customer. So you will do user testing. There are a bunch of tests that you will do to make sure that it doesn't break existing stuff. And then vulnerability management. Okay, great. Now you've got your code, you did secure coding, you did testing, you made sure that your configurations were good, etc., etc. Now what? You need to monitor it, because most of us use different libraries, we use different scripts, etc. We use vendor software also. So you need to make sure that somebody is monitoring it to make sure that if suppose there is a patch that needs to be applied, there is update that needs to be applied, there is some kind of a vulnerability that has been identified, is put into that particular software so that it is not vulnerable. Any questions so far? Okay. That brings us to, again, data security. So remember we said like customer information, classification about that. I mean, making sure that we are protecting our information in a way that it is protected, but At the same time, we cannot protect everything the same way. So that brings us to data, means protecting data at rest. Now, what exactly does data at rest mean? It means that when it is like, when something is on your laptop and you are not using it, unauthorized people cannot log in and steal your data. Why? Because there is full disk encryption. Then in transit, you have this HTTPS and there is a lock. Now, if you click on that lock, what you see is the digital certificate. So which tells you like, yes, this is valid, it's end to end, it's encrypted. It means that somebody cannot snoop in and read your user ID, password, etc., etc. So that is, when you talk about data, you're talking about protecting data at rest, you're protecting data in transit. And then another thing is that when you talk about data in use, suppose we have an environment when our customer is calling us and saying, hey, I cannot connect to XYZ, and we have a call center which is support staff is going to respond to that. Do you want that person who is helping with troubleshooting a customer, why can't I watch this movie or whatever, right? If you're Netflix, do you want that person to like go in and look at a person's like personal information, like their credit card, whatever information or thing, or their viewing habits or stuff? Probably not. So even when we provide somebody with access to something that they are allowed to, like suppose today you go to a you call a doctor's office and now you are talking with somebody regarding like payment. Hey, why did you send me this? I already made my copay, I paid you. Do you want that person to get access to your medical file? Probably not, right? Because they don't have the need for that. So making sure that even when that data is being in use, it is provided only to the people who have need for that, to provide you with answers to your questions about your payment information. That brings up to data backup. If I'm Netflix, I have to have backup of all my catalog of content, right? I cannot afford to like have a problem on one system and now all my movies are gone or my shows are gone or whatever. So that is data backup. To prevent data loss means you have to make sure that your data is backed up. But at the same time, that brings up to another important concept. Can you just store everything all the time forever? No, you can't, right? So you have to decide what data you're going to back up, where it's going to be backed up, for how long it's going to be backed up. And all that depends on the type of business you're running, the laws that you have to comply with, and again, the cost and the benefit. Any questions, just put them in the chat. This brings us to a very important concept called identity management. Now, what exactly is identity management? Access control. Means when we talk about identity management, the first step is, now you are high schoolers, probably in a couple of years or next year, you will apply for colleges. When you apply for colleges, you get accepted. They will send you, hey, great, welcome, blah, blah, blah. This is like, we are so happy to have you. Provide us with your government issued IDs or whatever it is that you require, right? So now the first step when we talk about identity management is to provide you with first is to verify who you are. Then they will provide you access to systems. So they could create user accounts, they could create access control, and we will walk you through how this is done. So now we come to your identity life cycle. Means identity means, like we said, okay, now you got accepted, or maybe you got a new job or an internship. So first thing is you go through various interviews, etc. Now you've accepted it. Now the HR process kicks in and they'll say, okay, provide me with all these information about you so that I can provision a new user account for you. Once they have validated you are who you say you are and it's not somebody else, that part is done. And why do they need to make sure that because there are a lot of governmental rules, regulations, etc. So now you are a new user. You may be a new student, you may be a new employee, whatever. So now I've created your new user account. I'm going to set up your, let's take an example of a person who's starting a new internship. So I have now provided you with access to certain systems that you need access to. I could, as a student, I will say, okay, in which classes are you registered? Now I have to provide you with access to those class shells. You could be using Blackboard, Canvas, or Sakai, or whatever else that you're using, right? Then once you are done, means your whatever 6, 8, 12 weeks of your internship is over, identity deprovisioning means now you are leaving your company, maybe you have graduated, now your access to that particular environment is no longer required. We are done. If all your grades are posted, now you have your transcripts, etc., etc. You will be deprovisioned, means there will be a limit on how long we will provide you with access to things that you are required to have. So identity deprovisioning means your ID will be deactivated. Why? Because why would I want to give you? It's like you live in a rented apartment, you leave. Do you get like keys to that apartment forever? No, probably not, right? Because now the new person who's, and why would I give out keys to everybody or keys to the mailbox? If you move, you do not need access to it. So you're supposed to return it to the post office and they will give you new keys to your new mailbox, etc. Same way, deprovisioning, making sure that a person is removed timely so that they do not come in and cause problems for your business. So now you have this whole life cycle covered. First day, you're trying to log in. What is that called? Login is called authentication. What exactly is authentication? Verifying your identity. Remember we said like we have verified it, we provided you with a user ID, password. Now you are logging in for the first time. So proof of identity, how do you implement it? Using passwords. So you have a user ID, password. You might be given a dongle. You might get a one-time password on your email or your phone number, whatever. So all that, right? So that is like, again, that brings us to two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Authentication means making sure it is who we think it is. Any questions? Okay. So what are the common types of authentication? It could be password based, means user ID and password. So here's what happens. Depending on what you are doing, in the sense, if it is what should we say? It is an app which maybe you look at cat videos, right? So everybody uploads cat videos and that's all that app is doing. User ID, password, hey, great, right? Because there is no confidential information, there is nothing else, and that should be appropriate. However, look at your banking app. When you talk about your banking app, I want to make sure it is who you say you are, right? And I can validate it. I'm going to make sure that I save that information. So in that case, what do? Say, hey, you can use this app on your phone. Now, what that app does is every time you try to log in, you will see that little blue icon on the top, it is picking up your location information. Where are you logging in from? Then device fingerprint. It has certain characteristics of your device. So it is trying to make sure that before providing you access to that banking environment, it collects enough information for it to make sure that it is who it is supposed to be. How do they do that? Through biometrics, Face ID. It could do it through your fingerprint. It could do it through various different things, right? So when you do this authentication, maybe when you talk about passwords, we're talking about multi-factor. So what exactly does multi-factor mean? It means that you validate somebody's identity through something they know, passwords, something they have, maybe a dongle or any kind of one-time password or whatever that is sent, and something they are means biometrics, you face ID, right? That is who you are. So now we've covered that authentication types, what is multi-factor, and let's go move forward. So this brings us to our multi-factor authentication and types to verify. Again, when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we should make sure that it is indeed multi-factor and it is not sending the same thing 2 times, right? So you may say, oh, I'll send you an SMS, but then at the same time, I'm sending you you can validate something via email. What does that do? It's all coming to my phone. Now, if somebody has access to my phone, they're going to get both of them. So this is where a lot of crypto kind of crypto related scams happen, because if you buy or sell cryptocurrency, you have an app on your phone, and maybe if you do not enable like face ID, or you do not have some other kind of authentication, or on your iPhones, you have what is known as a significant location. Means it basically makes sure, like suppose somebody steals your phone and it's not where you are used to logging in, they will say, okay, yeah, great, you're trying to log in with this 6-digit passcode, but I want to make sure, I want to get your face ID so that I know who you are, because you are not at your location, at your current location. What does that do? It is doing multi-factor authentication before providing access to your phone. So this is something that Apple has introduced. But as a business, you need to make sure that you are not using the same factor 2 times instead of providing pure multi-factor. So when you talk about multi-factor, something you have, something you are, something you know, making sure that those things are not like, it's not like, oh, you know the password and then you put in something else or something. So just making sure that you change that up. Now, great, you logged in. What can you do? That is authorization. What can you do with the system? What kind of role do you have? Just as if you, as a student, you were provided access to Canvas or Blackboard or some other system, right? You log in, but you will get access as a student, whereas an instructor has an instructor ID. They get access as an instructor. So authorization, making sure that you are put in a group, and we will talk about a role-based access control, etc., in a couple of slides. So making sure that you are put in a group where you are given certain things that you can do. So suppose, like when we talk about you creating a Google Doc, now you created a Google Doc, you are the owner, you invite your friend to collaborate. What do you want them to do? To comment on it? Do you want them to edit it? Do you want them to only read it and then call you and tell you like, yeah, this looks good or not, right? So it depends on what you want them to do. You will provide them with authorization. So now they decide like, what is somebody authorized to do? So how do you implement authorization? You do it through access control. Access control means you will decide what systems a person is able to have access to. You can do it through permissions. Like first thing is, I do not provide you with access to HR systems, because it's a college, right? And you are a student. Why would you need access to a HR system? You're not going to get paid. They're not going to, right? So now as an instructor will have access to HR systems, where they can log in and see their paycheck or whatever, change the place where their money is going to go in, the bank account, etc., etc. But you as a student probably won't get that. So access control. Second thing is permissions. means what you can do inside that very system, Canvas or Blackboard, you can do as a student will be very different from what a TA can do, from what a professor can do. It's going to be different. And then rules and policies. So basically, you will implement certain policies and group rules, etc., on what everybody in that class students can do. Which brings us to role-based access controls. Now, think about this. There are, say, maybe 40 students in my class. Every time somebody comes in, do I now set up their permissions? It's just going to be unmanageable. So what do? I create a role called student role. And then every student throughout every class depends on the class, right? So some students need access to maybe like if there is like say a medical class, then they need some extra systems, etc. But for the most part, most students will be given certain permissions. So you can see discussion boards, you can comment on it, you can submit your assignments, you can look at stuff, you can like inbox me, etc., etc. So role-based access control. So you give that permissions, you create that role, and then you provide that role to certain people who need that. Instructor, you create instructor role and then provide access to instructor role. Any questions? All right, that brings us to, again, access control models. Now, basically, what does this mean? Depending on how you decide on roles, you are going to define access. Means now you created a role, so you will decide on which systems have access to this, which systems can use these roles, and how are we going to allocate it. And sometimes you could even do what is known as discretionary access control. It means that suppose I own the data, means I own this system, so I own the data. If suppose tomorrow you come and tell me like, oh, I have this system and I would like to use that data, you are going to decide on who can be given that access, in the sense that the owner of that data decides like if he wants to share it with people. Like suppose your medical records, right? Not everybody can get it. So it's important, and it's like totally out of the thing, but you need to be aware that depending on what kind of access control model you use, like suppose the government uses a very different model from a business or from a university or from, so depending on what it is used, you will allocate that. That brings us to almost the end of this, and that is auditing. Means you provided all these different things. So I provided you with an identity, I provided you with authorization, now I've created this whole scheme on student, instructor, etc. However, just like we were doing monitoring, so how do I know? Suppose tomorrow you were to come and tell me like, yeah, this transaction is showing up in my account, I didn't do it. This is not my transaction. Can you just take a look at it and tell me who did this? So as a bank, I'm like going in and looking at what? Going to look in at logs. These are called audit trails, or these are logs. It tells me what time somebody logged in, when they logged in, from what device did they log in, what location. And I have to set all these things up. It's just not like you can't just like say, oh yeah, you will have all these things, right? So you set all that up. Why? Because I want to have accountability. So making sure that security logs are in place, systems are protected, and there is no gap of vulnerability. So we have taken care of that, making sure that I can prove as a business that yes, it was you or somebody who had access to your phone who logged in from XYZ location on this day and did whatever it was that they did. So then, what is the reason for this? What is the importance for this? Because as a business, you want to make sure that your customer who has authenticated, only those people get access to their systems. If there is a problem, in the sense like somebody is trying to use your login, your user ID and password, and they are guessing it multiple times, what do I do? After 3 attempts or whatever decided, like depends on your system, I am going to make sure that I tell them like, hey, after 3 attempts, thank you for logging in, but it looks like I'm just going to reset your password. Why don't you go to your maybe we send them a one-time password on their phone, or why don't you go to your email address or something and click on that link so we can reset your password, etc. Right? Spotting vulnerabilities. Then preventing breaches. We are trying to protect our systems from attack. So suppose there is a denial of service attack, in the sense that some malicious or malicious threat actor from somewhere is throwing a lot of traffic on our website, then that traffic is dropped in time, and people who are authorized to view our website or get that traffic can go in and use our systems properly. And how do we know? Because we see traffic coming in from places where we don't want it to come from. So we are going to then activate our DDoS, means denial of service or distributed denial of service protections, so that our website stays online and it is not prevented from servicing our valid, verified, authenticated customers. Does anybody have any question? If not, okay, I'll just wait a couple of minutes. So if anybody has any questions, if you are on LinkedIn, send me an invite and just say that you were on this HS Navigator, so I know who it is. And okay, I'll just wait for 2 minutes. If anybody has a question, I will take those questions at this time. Let me scroll through it. Yes, there will be a replay. It's been recorded. And all right. So in tomorrow's class, or okay, could you email? Yeah, LinkedIn. Yeah, just do a search on LinkedIn. Okay, let me quickly go to. Yep. So just do a search on LinkedIn and send me an invite. All right. So tomorrow we are going to talk about how to, like, if you're interested in cybersecurity careers, what are the different types of careers and what are the skills you need? And extremely important, join tomorrow's session. Why? Because sometimes, like, and I see that in my class in college, people think like cybersecurity is for computer science, or cybersecurity is for somebody who is interested in coding, or cybersecurity is somebody who is good at math or something. And all of these are true and all of these are false. Why do I say that? Because think about this, even if you want to become a lawyer, you can, there is cyber lawyers, right? Because they need to interpret what laws are out there. What if you are interested in different paths? So you don't need to have a certain career or something, and you can jump in at any time you want. So join me, and I look forward to seeing you. If nobody has any questions, bye bye, and I'll see you tomorrow.